Thank you, everyone. We're just reconvening our meeting this morning, and I just want to welcome our guests onto our Zoom call. Our guests are here today to present Te Mana o Te Wai Tita Ihu Collaboration Project. They are going to be presenting a case study report, stage 1, and they are seeking council endorsement for an ongoing collaboration with Tita Ihu Iwi and Top of the South Councils, Marlborough and Tasman, in the implementation of the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management 2020. So welcome everyone. I just want to acknowledge you, and I will acknowledge you by first name only today. We have Pania, who is here, and Luke and Melanie. Shane and Barney are going to be leading the proceedings, and then we have Rowena, Sylvia, Julia, Tracy, Sonia, Kuru and Anaru here as well. So welcome everyone to our meeting. We're looking forward to hearing from you, and really excited about this piece of work. I'm going to hand over to Barney and Shane now.
Kia ora tātou. No mea tuatahi, haruru te rangi nā tātā te rangi hi au ki runga hi au ki raro. Ko koutou te roka te whiro whiwhiri mai te whiro kairunga. Awhi nuku, awhi rangi, awhi papa, awhi tawa ti hei, a mauri ora.
Mauri ora.
Te mea tuatahi o nā mate ke wainanui o tātou. E te pauritanga ki tēnei wā, e te whānau, te hora, e te whānau woka, a mui mai. Hoi atu waki e te are e te ranga o nā tātou tūpuna ki Hawaii nui, Hawaii roa, Hawaii pāmama. Nō reira, e tō tātou kingi Māori tūheitia, e te iwi I ona tūranga waiwai, nō reira kei te mihi, kei te mihi. Tua roa, nau mai, whakatau mai, e raro e te kaupapa kei wainanui o tātou. E te roro hiko, e te whiti kōrero ki te ata nei. O nā taonga tuku iho o nā tātou tūpuna, e te kaupapa tuatahi te mana o te wai, e te mauri o te wai, e te hauora o te wai, e te whakapapa kei wainanui o tātou, a rangi nui a papa tuanuku. Nō reira, e te rangatira, e te matua, koromatua Rachel, tēnā koe, e te iwi kei konei te kauni hera, nō reira kei te mihi, kei te mihi. E te waka tokomaru, te ati awa Ngāti Tama, e te waka kura haupō Ngāti Kuia, e te waka tainui Ngāti Kuata, Ngāti Toa, Ngāti Rāroa hoki. Tū hono whakako tahitanga I te karanga ki tēnei ata. Tuarua te kaupapa e te poka nā taonga tuku iho o Ngāti Rāroa, poipoia te au tūroa, maranga mai. Koutou katoa e te kauni hira, tēnā tātou. Tēnā tātou e tō whiti kōrero ki te ata nei. E te roro hiko, kei wainanui o tātou. Nō reira, aku rauranga tira mā, tō kana mā nā teina mā, e te kaumātua, e te kauni hira. Roka, raua e te whaia a tāhua Mel, tēnā korua, e tō tautoko, mō tō manaki e te kauni hira. Nō reira, aku rauranga tira mā, tēnā koutou, a kia ora tātou katoa.
Kia ora.
Ai ke ngā mai o ngā tūpuna I ngā te tahi mano warurau e.
Te heke mai raro, te heke te panua, te heke hauhaua, te heke niho puta, kua no tia, taku noi no puta, mo te rurea hea. Te heke whiri nui, ki tuki aru he, te heke niho mano, te mana o te whenua, te heke tama te ua. Ora uri o nā heke ngā ki atu nei, e ia. Nō reira e te rangatira roka, tēnā koe, e te rākau ki a koe, whakakapi ki te taha kia Shane. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa.
Kia ora.
Kia koe, Roka?
Tēnā tātou. Tī te pō tū tau, tū ka puta ki te whai au ki te ao marama, si hei mauri ora. E tautu kana ngā mihi ki tūngarawa, manama nā ki tanga nāna I whakatau kerungi a tātou. E noho nei kerungi te ipurangu wānanga nei. E tautu kana hoki ngā mihi ki rātou, ki o tātou mate, e hinga mai ana I o tātou marae mā, puta no I tumotu. E ngā mate haere atu rā, rātou ki te pō, tātou ki te ao marama, a tēnā tātou katoa. Nā rere, e rauranga tiro mā, a tēnā koutou, Tēnā koutou, ngā mea o koutou, e mau ana I te korowai, o te mana whenua, o te haukainga. Nei rā te mihi kia koutou katoa. Kia te ati awa, ko Ngāti Tama, ko Ngāti Apa, ko Rangitāne, ko Ngāti Kuia, ko Ngāti Koata, ko Ngāti Rārua, ko Ngāti Toa Rangatira. Nei rā te mihi kia koutou katoa, mai te kauni hero whakatū nei, mai te koromatua, me ngā kai mai o te kauni hero whakatū, e mihi kaua nei kia koutou katoa. Ka tuku anonga hoki ngā mihi kia koutou, mō ngā taonga nā koutou kua mōria mai, kei waingunui a tātou I tēnei wā. E tikana tawa kōrero nei, koutou te whakaaro nei, I whakaorai o tātou wai, te mea nei, I whangai a mātou, kia orai te tangata. Nā reira, tēnā koutou mō ngā mana, mō koutou mana, o koutou whakaaro rangatira, kua mōria mai, kia whakahokia mai, ki tēnei te mana o te wai, kua whareki hia e te kauni hera. Mi harurawa atu nei, kia hiti ngā mahi kua mahi e koutou, kia mahi tahi tātou, ki te whakarongo ki ngā wero, I wero mai kia mātou, o te kauni hera nei, kia konei ono hoki te mahi tahi, ko te tūmanako nei, ka haere whakamua, ki ngā mahi tahi tātou I tēnei wā. E tika ana te kōrero, nā uterauru, nā mātou terauru, kōra I te tangata. Me mihi anō rā, kia koutou Ngāti Rārua, kua mōria mai o koutou o koutou ripoata rautaki, poia te ao tūroa. Tēnei anō ki ngā mihi kia koutou mō era mahi, o te era rautaki. Hei whakatupu nei, hei whakarewa ake, tēnei waka, tēnei kaupapa kei mui a tātou, tō tātou kaupapa nei. Nā reira, tēnā koutou. Nā reira, kore kumea roa, ngā kore I ki te au, te pau haere o te wā, hoi anō, he tino mihi nui kia koutou katoa, nā kua tāmana I tēnei wā. Ko puta mai ke waingunui. Nā reira, tēnā koutou, a tēnā tātou.
Ka rongona I roto nei me he tai takare, e ake nā ki te rai o tū kei waho, ko te tomo atu koe te honoki wairua, hine I te kupu mana o te arai noi, ki au hoki mai ai te waiora ki te iwi e.
O tēnā tātou, tēnā koutou, nā pai, e waha nei nā kōrero e nā kupu o kaua o te ata nei. Te tūmanako nei kia whakakapi ai tēnei wahanga kōrero, whai muri ake ko anaru hei e whakatōta mauri I roto I tēnei hui huinga a tāna karakia. Engari e mua tēnā e tautoko ai ngā kōrero arika o te wā nei, e pāne ki tēnei mea poi a te ao tūroa. Ko te painga tika tō kōrero a ruka, he rautaki, e pepa nei iho. I ngā kore koutou e whakatinana tāuatahi, e raru kei tahairi. Nō reira te āta whakatūpatotanga me whakatinana ai tēnei kaupapa. A iwi, e tukuna nei mua te aroro koutou nā kaunihera o te rohi nei, o te tauihu. A kia kahara tata. Kia kahara kia noho ai I runga nā uara o tēnā rautaki me nā tirohanga whānui a te iwi o te rohi nei o tātou. Hari nā tahi ai tātou, mahi nā tahi tātou. I roto I tēnei kaupapa o te wā, te nangara kei wanganui a tātou, whakararu I a tātou tēnei wā ara ko te mati urita. Engari, ka whai pono, whai tika, kei reira te oranga mō tātou tātou. Hoi anō, rino ki a tātou, ki anaru, hei karakia whakakapi, ka tukuna te rākau hoki atu rākau ki ana koe a Kate whai muri aka. Tuia te rangi e tūnei, tuia te papa e tākoto nei, tuia te mukatangata e tā kia mai, hawai ki nui, hawai ki rua, hawai ki pāmauma. Tuia whiria ki te mukatangata e taunei whiria ki te hi whatua ki te wehe, herea ki te mana ta mao ki te tapu ki o putarā, ki te whaiao ki te o mārama, tūturu whakamaua ki a tīna.
Tīna. Tai ki e.
Tēnā tātou, mutu tēnei taha, wāti atu tā rākau. Me te papa ki a koutou o te kaunera. Thank you, Kate. We'll hand it back to you, to the committee to carry on with your business. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you so much for your introductions and your mihi wakatau. I think that now I have Maxine and Sonia who are going to introduce the item and the council report and explain why this work is so important for council. And then we are going to have our iwi environmental managers give a presentation. So Maxine and Sonia, I think handing over to you now.
Kia ora. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Maxine Day toko ingoa. I'm the Environmental Planning Manager here at Nelson City Council. Yes, I'm here to initially present the report and really explain to you that this is a first step in some reasonably significant work that the Council and iwi are undertaking collaboratively. It's part of our work to implement the NPS, the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management 2020. And I think what was significant about that NPS-FM is that it elevated te mana o te wai as a very important concept under legislation that had not previously been in such an elevated position. And so it's extremely important that we are working with iwi to establish how the mana of water will be upheld across our region. Importantly, it's not just an issue for iwi. The integrity of water is relevant to all of our communities and something that is being pursued across a number of fronts. So while we are working on this piece of work, there is collaboration and work going on with iwi and our communities to improve our waterways in many of the catchments across Nelson. This collaborative project has been quite evolution in terms of how we've been working. We have been working collaboratively with iwi in the development of the freshwater provisions for the draft Nelson plan, and that was operating under the previous NPS FM, and then since the 2020 version came out, we've had to reevaluate how we work and how we can work most efficiently with the iwi, and effectively including consideration of how they need to work to input on this. So what you're seeing through this project proposal is a a collaboration to recognise that all 8 iwi are having to look at these issues and establish the meaning and concepts under Te Mana o Te Wai. And for us, working together with them and across the other councils represents a very sort of effective way for us to move forward. Not only that, but it's also developing and underpinning a greater growth in our understanding of Te Mana o Te Wai and the values and issues that are of significance to Te Tau Ihu iwi. And the work that we're doing through this has got a broad application, not just in our plans, but also in the work that we're doing in other activities of council. So for us, this is quite a significant piece of work, and I would like to hand it over to Ro to run through a presentation about the first stage report. That is really one of the early steps that we need to take in furthering our work. Kia ora, Ro.
Thanks, Maxine. So, Ro, looking forward to hearing from you now.
Kia ora koutou. We were just going to begin with kura doing the introduction, so kia koe kura.
Ai, kia ora Rowena. Tēnā koutou katoa e nā rauranga tirama. Tēnā koe, Rachel, Mel, Luke, Kate. Tēnā koutou katoa hoki e nā mema o komiti taiao. Tēnā koutou katoa e nā kai whakahaere o te kaunihira a whakatū. Tēnā koe Shane mo te karakia i a tātou katoa, nau e whakeiri te aho tapu, i te rangi ki te papa i te rangi, tēnā koe. Thank you everyone for being here today. We welcome this opportunity to present the Te Tauihu o Te Mana o Te Wai case study report. This report was supported by Our Land and Water National Science Challenge with funding and support from Tina Paro, Pia Pohata, Naomi Aparo, Ronnie Cooper and Ursula Pesau, and I just want to acknowledge them for their support to help the Potaiao to develop this report. So it was a collaborative project with, and the report was developed by 6 of the 8 iwi. And so Te Tauihu is one of the 3 national case study reports as part of this national project. And so we contributed to this very important kaupapa of Te Mana o Te Wai and what it means for our whānau hapu and iwi around the motu. And more importantly, our relationship with our tupuna awa. So the report has been presented to the Te Waka Māui Iwi Chairs Forum and was fully endorsed. The report was also presented to the CEOs, mayors, senior executive leadership of the 3 councils, Nelson, Marlborough and Tasman. And today we present the report to you. So as others have spoken about, just want to reflect on the journey of those who have brought forth this important Te Mana o Te Wai, the principles, the priority of bringing forth the importance of our waterways, the health and well-being of our waterways first and foremost. And then obviously with Te Mana o Te Wai, secondly is then the provision that's available for our peoples and our communities. And then third, looking to review our current freshwater management systems and looking to also restore and enhance our waterways. So a very important mahi for us all, and it's our collective priority for all of us. So I'd like to now hand over to our Potaiao, Marina, Sylvie, Julia, to run through the presentation for you all. Ngā mihi kia koutou katoa.
Kia ora, kia ora.
Kia ora. I'm starting off, ko Julia Eason toko ingoa, ko Kaimahi mo te taiao mo te runanga o Ngāti Kuia Trust. So I'm the taiao planner for Ngāti Kuia, and I get the first straw, the short straw for the presentation today. This is one of our many beautiful pictures in our presentation today. This is one of the projects we're working on, the Te Hoere project, but we'll just flip over to the first slide. We've got some wonderful diagrams. I think it's really important to set out the context of why iwi are participating in Te Mana o Te Wai and what the differences and some of the perceptions around Te Mana o Te Wai. Obviously, the protection and enhancement of the mauri of freshwater is always important from a Te Ao Māori perspective, and it's the highest priority collectively shared across all of the 8 Te Tauihu iwi. And the National Policy Statement, which Maxine referred to, provides a significant opportunity for iwi to co-design with the councils, all 3, Tasman, Marlborough as well, how Te Mana o Te Wai will be given effect in the rohe that is shared by the collective iwi 8. So moving on to the next slide, please. So the aims for iwi would be an increased participation in the management of freshwater. The avenues have always, to an extent, existed but never been fully realised, including through settlement. Opportunities were developed there but never, again, fully realised. This provides an opportunity to realise what that co-management looks like. The protection and restoration of the mauri of Wai, and to undertake kaitiakitanga in a meaningful way. So there's 3 steps in our view as to how we achieve that. What we're presenting shortly is the stage 1 report further through this presentation. Stage 2 is, we're just at the beginning of the stage 2 at the moment. Ngāti Tama have been very successful on behalf of the iwi 8 of achieving significant funding to undertake our work in this project, which we can talk about. And then stage 3 is implementing Te Mana o Te Wai. However, we're already starting to do that. So we are on 2 parallel paths, really. So the iwi participation and restoration project has been underway for a number of years now to achieve Te Mana o Te Wai. So in a Te Ao Māori perspective, the Te Mana o Te Wai isn't written down on a piece of paper through the NPS. It exists outside of that. However, from a legislative process, there is a definition, so understanding of what that is and some timeframes associated with that, which we'll get to. Next slide, please. So the National Policy Statement for Freshwater is when the Te Ao Pākehā world was introduced to the concept of Te Mana o Te Wai. I think it's the 2014 version of it. As Maxine said, in 2020, it introduced the hierarchy of obligations to achieving Te Mana o Te Wai. The first of those is the health of the water itself. The second to that is the needs of the people. And third, and the line of priorities is for the social, economic and cultural well-being. And also you could say commercial and industrial uses, I think, if you to change your perspective there as well. Next slide. So involved in the iwi-led Te Mana o Te Wai project is quite a wide range of parties within the top of the South. So Tai Ao representatives from Ngāti Tama, Ngāti Rāroa, Te Atiawa, ourselves Kuia, Ngāti Koata, Rangatane and Ngāti Apa ki te Rātō. However, you'll also notice that representatives from Ngāti Toa are here today and are joining the project. We've also had good conversations with Nelson, Tasman and Marlborough District Councils. There's also been quite a lot of support coming through the Our Land and Water National Science Challenge, both in funding the stage 1 report and also funding some of the on-the-ground projects that are already underway. And also for the Ministry for the Environment, who have also provided funding for the project and lead the National Policy Statement for Freshwater. And they're funding several projects within the top of the South region relating to water quality. Next slide. So the stepping stones, where we've come to. This is one of the first exciting projects where the iwi 8 and Te Tauihu have come together on a specific kaupapa, so specific cause. The stage 1 report was basically a state of play for today. It's the context and where we're at. Stage 2, the design and implementation recommendation with councils. Nelson's a little bit further along in this because of where you are at with your environmental planning at this stage. Tasman are only just beginning their environmental plan, and the Marlborough District Councils at the appeal stage. So they kind of did a lot of their work prior to the NPS 2020 coming out. So their plan was notified in 2016. So where Nelson is at is quite a good springboard to implement Te Mana o Te Wai in our view. We'll be working with the 3 councils and trying to develop a consistent approach through the policy working groups. And then we need to undertake long-term monitoring and reflect back. So we've got that big loop, that constant improvement loop that's there. So we're not at the start. We're a fair way along already, and it's going to continue. So you're not at square one, which is always good to know. The next slide, please. This is just a swathe of some of the projects that iwi are already actively participating in and have been participating in. There's a couple of those, the Mahitahi River Project with Ngāti Kowata in there, and quite a few across the rohe for iwi. Move to the next. And I think I am now handing over to Sylvie, who will be presenting Te Mana o Te Wai Stage 1 report. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Julia. Kia ora tātou. Ko Sylvie Filippo tōku ingoa, the Paitaiao for Te Aotearoa Trust.
Kia ora, Sylvia.
Kia ora.
So this is the cover image of our iwi report. So some of you may recognise this as Te Waikoropupu Springs. It's a taonga and is considered wahi tapu of significant cultural and spiritual regard. Very fitting image for the cover. The report was compiled for the iwi of Te Tau Ihu and has been mentioned. This is one of the case studies contributing to the nationwide project commissioned by Our Land and Water National Science Challenge. Next slide, please. So going over the purpose of the report, this was to record the values and interests for Wai and identify issues for the management of Wai and opportunities to assist iwi and councils to co-design a planning framework for how Te Mana o Te Wai provisions and the new national directions will be given effect to. So it was really helpful for us to have this all recorded in one document. As part of the established process, we met back in February of 2021 with Tina Parau and her team. At that stage, we confirmed the project membership, position, scope and timeline. So we had Dr. Ronnie Cooper of Ngāi Tahu, who is an experienced strategic policy advisor. She was brought in as the project writer. Then we had Ursula Passel of Mana Whenua ki Mohua, who took on the role of project lead. By March, we had entered the information gathering stage, where the iwi reps provided several source documents to feed into the main report. So this included iwi management plans, CIAs, cultural impact assessments, settlement documents, and then other reports like the 1999 Te Tau Ihu Mahituna Eel Management Plan and the 2020-2021 Te Waikoropupu Springs Water Conservation Order. In April, we held hui with Hokainga across the rohe, where we explored 3 key topics, including past and present relationships with Wai, lessons learned, and future iwi aspirations for the management of Wai. By May and June, we were reviewing the first draft and working in a combined space on Microsoft Teams to edit and further refine the document. By August, we had completed the final report. Next slide, please. So this is just a high-level overview of the report. In the beginning, the report introduces the iwi of Te Tau Ihu, their kaitiaki responsibilities for Wai. Then it goes on to summarise existing relationships of iwi with their waters and iwi understandings of the concept of Te Mana o Te Wai. This is then followed by discussion on iwi relationships with councils in relation to freshwater management, including what is working well, challenges and gaps. The report then identifies the current capacity and capability of iwi to participate in freshwater management. So basically, we concluded that there are information gaps and capacity issues. So we'll get to how to address some of those issues with recommendations on the next slide. So the report provides a total of 20 recommendations. including strategic and practical measures to support better environmental outcomes, more effective partnerships, and proactive, meaningful solutions. So, of the recommendations, 11 are for iwi, 2 are for central government ministries, and 9 are for the 3 councils. So of all the recommendations, there are a total of 6 that involve provision of funding and resourcing. Next slide, please. So the key recommendations, so we have 3 here. Slide previous, please. Yeah, thanks. Oh. Yeah, thank you. That the 3 councils establish a fund to resource the capacity and capability of ngā iwi to support councils to implement Te Mana o Te Wai, that ngā iwi are provided the time and resources to apply mātauranga to fresh water management in the rohe, and that iwi and councils review, develop and implement decision-making models which are collaborative and reflective of Te Ao Māori. Tēnā koutou, that concludes my section. I'll now pass you to Rowena Cudby, who will talk on how this ties in with stage 2 of the project.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Rowena Cudby tōku ingoa, he kaimahi hau mo te runanga o Ngāti Rārua, hei Pautaiao. My name's Rowena Cudby and I'm the Environmental Manager at Te Runanga o Ngāti Rārua. So I'm just presenting on stage 2 of our project. Next slide, thank you. Leading on from the report which Sylvia's talked to, just to recap, stage 1 was gathering the information and that's been presented in the form of our stage 1 report, and stage 2 is to co-design the planning framework for Te Mana o Te Wai with councils. Next slide, please. So during stage 2, the iwi group will be conducting a 3-year project aimed at supporting iwi to identify and build the tools, resources, capacity and capability needed to achieve the Te Mana o Te Wai project outcomes. So this is the information gaps and the capacity gaps that Sylvie mentioned. To this end, we've obtained funding from the Ministry for the Environment's Te Mana o Te Wai Fund, and that's a $767,000 fund with iwi contributions in kind that will be over $1 million project. The project outputs will include mātauranga-led catchment-focused discussion with whānau and hapu to gain better understanding of their perceptions and expectations around Te Mana o Te Wai. We'll be collecting information from ngā iwi o te tauhihuho on their values and approaches to water management, and that includes the existing projects that are happening now as well as future projects. We'll be preparing a spatial platform to store and display information using GIS technology, and we'll be exploring cultural monitoring frameworks, which is something that will benefit this project as well as much wider environmental mahi in the rohe. Next slide, please. This diagram here just sums up the relationship between council and iwi. So we've got in the dark blue stream our iwi-led project for stage 2. We were in the process of identifying a project team, and then that team will be generally leading the mahi directly with whānau, hapu and iwi, and marae and other Māori entities. And the iwi policy working group will also be liaising with those groups as well as leading the liaison with the council policy teams. So that's that connection there through to our work that we're doing with the council staff. Go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so just to sum up really, that stage 2 for us is an iwi-led project to provide that information and data that we identified as missing in stage 1, and that information and data will support the iwi policy working group as we work with council staff on implementing the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management through planning documents. Kia ora, I'll just now hand over to Kura, who will take any questions.
Okay, thank you so much. Who did you say you're handing over to?
Kura,
Oh,
or
Kura.
Kura Stafford.
Okay. So Kura, it would be great if there are any questions. Is now a good time for councillors to ask questions?
Yes.
Thank you so much for the presentation. It was really, really well done. It was so engaging and really it's conveyed so well the objectives of Te Mana o Te Wai. So I really enjoyed it and appreciate the time it's taken to convey in the Te Ao Pākehā world what you're trying to achieve. So thank you. If I can't see people with their hands raised because we still have the PowerPoint. Oh no, here we are. Maybe Robin, if you can cue me who's got their hands raised, or Pania. Do I have questions from anyone?
No hands raised.
No hands raised. It seems like it was a very clear explanation of what you're trying to achieve, everyone. So I think that no questions means that people are really excited by the project and looking forward to seeing it progress. I think it was really helpful to realise that these are the words which we're creating to explain what we're trying to do, but quite a lot of the work's already being undertaken, and that sort of the commitment of our councils to environmental restoration of our waterways allows that collaboration and co-creation to occur. I can see, Rachel, you've raised your hand, so you might like to comment if you haven't got questions.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Rachel Rees toku ingoa, koro te koro mātua whakatū. Ngā mihi nui, thank you for the mahi that has gone into producing the work that we're looking at today, and the platform that it creates for our well-being and well-being of our wai, of our people, of tangata, of bringing together our community. And I'm just very impressed with the methodology that you've used, that the teams have used. And Kura, I don't have a question as such around the recommendations and the stages, but I do have is I'm interested in your reflection on how we're positioned as Te Tauihu to participate in the broader water agenda that's so live at the moment. And I noticed that the report references the Three Waters reform work, and I'm just wanting to get a reflection on how we're positioned to be able to fully participate in the opportunities for Te Mana o Te Wai in that reform process, and whether you've turned your mind to that.
Oh, that's a good question, Rachel. I guess that those reforms will be informed by obviously Te Mana o Te Wai, anything that has to do with water, and I think it will be helpful to inform those processes, because if you're putting the why and the waterways first and foremost, I mean, it is a huge shift, and I acknowledge that it's a very complex and there's many strands to it. But if we all turn our minds to our waterways and looking after it and recognizing, acknowledging that it's actually a koha and a gift back to us, that's our lens that we need to consider. Well, it's requiring us to consider now through Te Mana o Te Wai. So, but I haven't thought more. And I see Rowena and Julia may also offer some insights as well. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Yes, I just was going to add that our focus in this project has been the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management and the provisions of that. However, through the reform process for iwi, the Three Waters is proposing that Te Mana o Te Wai statements will be required, not required, but encouraged, and we anticipate that this work will very definitely build on that and provide us with those Te Manawa Te Wai statements in order to participate in that process. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Kia ora, Rowena. Just, I think probably just in reflecting on that, so I suppose one thing that I would ask is that, and I don't think they'll be, in terms of the Three Waters work, I'd say they will be required, absolutely required, in mana o te wai at every single level of decision making and operations, and the whole concept is predicated on te mana o te wai. So I'm just sort of encouraged as you're going through this process to think, and I know you already are, just really think about that opportunity for Te Taiho to actually be really ready and leading as we go through those processes. And I just feel like you've got such good work here that we're really well placed. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Rachel. Julie, yeah, you had a comment too.
Yeah, kia ora. I think to answer that question about how well positioned Te Tauihu is, you've got two things working in your favour. One of those is the collaborative space that we're in. So most iwi are cooperating with all three councils, and the more collaboration there is, the more economy of scale, and that's really what we're trying to achieve in this project. So we don't have to do the same thing 3 times. We can do it once and do it right and put all those resources in the one basket to really get further faster and in the spirit of kotahitanga mo te taiao sort of collaboration. The other one is the work that we did with Nelson specifically on the water provisions within the draft plan really nutted out a lot of these values. Nelson's particularly invested quite a lot of time in understanding Te Ao Māori values in developing those policies in draft. So you've got quite a bit of a springboard there. So you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's not a very efficient way of operating, but if you can build on what you've already done and identify what's done well and work towards that, I think you're well positioned. But we all know that councils and iwi have a real staffing capacity issue at the moment, and that some of the answers to the questions that need to be asked aren't going to be quick. No one necessarily has the answer. We're going to have to do a bit of work in some of those spaces, and so there's a bit of a risk there as well, where we don't have some of that mātauranga immediately available to us. So that's where we need to start focusing, is those gaps that came out of the stage 1 report. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Matt, I see you've got your hand raised. I just had a quick follow-up question, and then I'll go over to you, Matt. I'm actually speaking at the Freshwater Conference this week, and I wanted to talk about freshwater in the context of climate change and how our future response to climate change is very much connected holistically to soil regeneration and water restoration. So soil and water will become into the future like gold. You know, how we take care of our waterways and take care of our soil is key to our climate change response, both mitigation and adaptation as we experience more extreme weather events, either through drought or increased rainfall. And I'm just wondering how iwi are thinking about that in terms of that bigger picture, looking into the future. Kura, maybe you want to answer. I can just see Barney laughing.
Sorry, Kay. What did to respond to you? What you're talking about? I mean, you know, Māori have always been holistic. The problem is we haven't been at the table. So
Yes,
once we're
I know.
at the table, we will be very, very helpful. So you know, that's of course we don't isolate things, and that's always the that's always how the current system doesn't work for us, because we're very holistic. So of course, when we talk about why, what we actually mean is everything, maunga, you know, whenua, puna. So you know, that's the thing. We don't limit ourselves in how we see that. So yeah, just want to acknowledge that.
Well, I'm looking forward to that shift hopefully happening in the Te Ao Pākehā world as well. So thank you. Okay, Matt, you have a question.
Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Matt Laurie ho. Thank you, everyone. 8 years ago, when I was first elected to council, the locals out at Parramatta Flats asked me to come out and have a look at the Wakapuaka River there and the impact of pollution on the swimming hole. And it was pretty grim. And there were animals in the stock in the river creating pollution. And that was 8 years ago. Over the summer, we went out to Cable Bay and had a swim. And we decided we'd have a swim at Parramatta Flats to get the salt off on the way home. And we went to that beautiful spot, and the swimming hole was closed because of poor water quality. And I found it a pretty depressing experience on a beautiful whakatū summer day. We've had a lot of announcements, we've had a lot of policies when it comes to fresh water over the last 8 years. And I know it's a huge job, but I'm really excited about what I'm hearing today. But what I wanted to ask is, when you consider how big the job is and the amount of frustration there is about things like closed water holes, swimming holes, how optimistic are you that this new direction will get results?
If everyone's embracing, I mean, for Māori, we've been, how many hundreds of years are we talking now? It's the same kōrero, Matt. So it's not new to us. It's just we need to change the system. The system doesn't work for us. It doesn't work for our waterways. It doesn't work for our maunga and our whenua. And that's why we're here today. And that's why it's a huge to have Te Mana o Te Wai as a statutory instrument. It affords us the opportunity now, along with every other statutory instrument we've got. It's the willingness of human beings, more importantly for Māori to be at the decision-making table. That's the imbalance, that's the inequity. So we're working towards that. We've got a lot to build on. As Julia has said, there's some great things happening. So it's a willingness, a collective willingness, but we do have to influence and change the current system. And hence why Te Mana o Te Wai is about whānau hapuniwi, working with our councils, working with our communities to co-design a freshwater management framework. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Julia?
Shane and Barney also had their hands up. So Julia and then Shane and Barney.
Kia ora. I'm just going to answer for Matt that the real shift in paradigm is the shift in priorities that comes from Te Mana o Te Wai. And that's where the shift needs to happen in order to address those issues, because often there's this conception that it's a trade-off between social values, environmental values versus economic values. What we really need to say and understand is that the economic values reside within those human values as well, and within those environmental values. So we're no longer in the trade-off. There's no trade-off to be had. The two depend on each other. And once that mindset changes, then how we make decisions around water will change, and that improves, in my view, my confidence that those changes are starting to happen now, because people like yourself see what happens when you don't make those right decisions, and now you're in a better position to make an informed decision to improve that. So it's not all on you, but you're in a very strong position of power to make those changes if you can understand, and addressing that climate change question earlier as well. The effects of this is going to outlast all of us and go beyond ourselves. So it's also looking beyond the self and beyond being re-elected and beyond whatever other values we bring in to our conversations, to put that aside and think about what the long-term goal is, not just the next long-term plan, which is 10 years. We need to look at the 500-year plan and start working towards that. So the longer ahead you look, like when you're driving down the road, if you look just in front of the car, you're going to crash, right? So you need to look further down the road to that corners, to those bends, and then you can make better judgments. So that's my view. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Julia.
Kia ora, Julia. Shane and Barney.
Okay. Just trying to work out who's eating the last chocolate biscuit here. So just because
I know it looked like some good morning tea happening there.
Yeah. Cool. There you go.
Oh, well, kia ora, everybody. Look, firstly, I wonder how, and we're talking different frameworks here. From a Westminster framework, to a tikanga framework, and how aligned are they? So I asked the question about when push comes to shove, when things start to get a bit difficult, I find, and I know, there are a lot of planners and policy people and advisors. Where do they turn to? They will turn to the policy and the legislation when things become difficult. So the issue for me is how aligned are the current policies and legislation, that's the LAW, how aligned are they to the LORE? And things need to be to change. And I've heard our environmental kaimahi talking about changes in relation to the policy. Though there's the first hurdle that we come to is around when things start to get a bit difficult, as I've said, those people will turn to the policies and to the legislation. So how do we provide, how do you provide for our tikanga and our LORE among those policies and legislation? That's the first question, I suppose, Whittle, that I'd throw out there on the floor. The second is, and we've talked about it, we cannot isolate the water from the whenua and the other taonga tuku iho that have been passed down to us. That's the mistake that I won't say we, that's the mistake you have made in the past, is saying we want a plan for the water, and then we want a plan for the whenua, we want a plan. Actually, they all interrelate and all interact. One affects the other, so we can't take them in isolation. I was talking to Shane, and he reminded me that why and where did Mana o Te Wai come from? It came out of Havelock North. If you recall, the loss of so many lives because of the water, or the standard of the water. And so here's an opportunity for the councils to take a stand alongside iwi to incorporate our values and our beliefs in the Westminster system. I recall fighting for many years around this. The likes of Jimmy Elkington, the late Jimmy Elkington, Janice Manson, Kerry Stevens, and there are many others. And they'd be looking down on us now, saying that's what we were standing for and fighting for in the past. So now we have to look forward to the future and implement and provide for whānau, hapu and iwi to be sitting at that decision-making table. And my cousin Kura has already talked about that. And if we're not sitting at the decision-making table, then shame on you all. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Barney. I won't say too much. I have been quite vocal in my concerns around the piece of work here, in terms of not just the work itself, because I think philosophically we're committed and we're in there as organisations and councils and so forth. It's about the public perception and how we can bring them along with us in terms of communication and allowing us to have the right information going out there. And I just allude to the situation going on in Waikawa at the moment, where we've got some real issues around our marae over there, and the threats against our marae that will be burnt down because we are supporting mana o te wai, which has nothing to do whatever with anti-vaccine. But there seems to be a whole range of effort at the moment to combine all these ngawe, all these take, all these issues into one catalyst point, which is affecting us on a range of levels. So we've got to be cognizant of that, and in a way, although we have all the information and we understand what it's all about, we have to actually allow the peoples of the rohi and around Te Tauihu to be clear on what it is we're doing and why we're doing it as well. So that's all I would encourage, is that we go along with that and we take everybody on this journey. And we believe it, because otherwise we wouldn't be here. Because the situation hasn't changed, it demands attention. And so, yeah, that's all, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you so much. And I think, look, this is such an important conversation for us as leaders in our community to all be thinking about the systems that we've inherited, and you know, that process of decolonisation, I guess, which many of us are committed to, in terms of shifting towards a more holistic approach in the way we set laws and legislation and govern. I think that there's definitely a paradigm shift. I really appreciated the korero, though, and the sort of thinking, and I think if we can align and change the system, so to speak, more, then that is going to look after all of humanity in a much better way. So I'm going to go over to Claire now. Claire, you had a comment, I think.
I think Councillor Skinner was before me, Kate.
Oh, okay. Tim?
Thank you for that. Hey, I'm enjoying the input. I'm just a little bit concerned at the tone. Kate Fulton, when you talk about the process of decolonisation and talking about Pākehā being not holistic in their views, I agree, and I think we're on the same hymn book, same page as the speakers that are kindly presented today, and it's great to have his understandings. But I am concerned, Chair Fulton, when we talk about Pākehā not holistic, etc. You can speak for yourself, but I think many Pākehā, as much as many Māori and as many any other cultures, are very forward-thinking. I mean, there's a mixture of views on a number of things, and we always want the best. And when we do things like our 10-year plans, many Pākehā, including myself, are thinking beyond the 10-year plan. So I'm just a bit conscious that we are all here together, trying to be on the same page and a partnership in one people with two cultures. But I get concerned when we get a little bit of bashing here, as if Pākehā and European do not know how to look after their waters, and things will change when others are put on the table. The table is open, and I just want to make sure that we are at a good tone and a good respect at this table. And that comes from you, Councillor Fulton.
I'm going to move over to Claire now. Thanks, Claire.
Morena, Kate and everyone. Ko Claire Barton, Toka Wingwa. I want to acknowledge the korero that's gone on this morning on this Zoom. I want to acknowledge the mahi that's been undertaken, both at a policy level, but also in terms of the work that we're doing with all iwi in our catchments. I think the outcomes that we're seeing are phenomenal, and I want to continue with that mahi with you all. And I'm very much excited about the prospect of stage 2 of this project. I think that we'll be seen as leaders in this field. I also just wanted to comment very briefly, Councillor Laurie raised the issue of Parramatta Flats. That's a perennial problem that we have with wildfowl in terms of birds and E. coli. So there are some sticky issues we also have to work through in terms of practicalities as well. So continue the good work. I look forward to continuing to working with you.
Kia ora, Claire, thank you so much. I'm not sure how we're going for time. I'm aware it's 10:25 and we probably need a short break now. According to my timesheet, it's actually perfect time for a short break. Sonia or Maxine, I think we were going to come back and look at the recommendations and resolution, but I think, do we need Shane and Barney to just finish off in terms of closing the hui of this part of the meeting? I might go back to Barney and Shane.
O ka pai tēnā koe Kate, a koutou mā, wēnei kōrero, e pāne ki te mana o te wai. E tika ana, e whai haere ana mātou, i te rongo nā kōrero, e pāne ki te mana o te wai, o te wai, i te wai, ki te wai, te tūmanako nei, kia kaha tātou. Kia wānanga te wānanga, kia mōhiotia te anga whakamua tātou. Reira, reno kia tātou, kia whakakapi tēnei taha. Tukura rākoe kia koe ruka, tēnā pēr, whakakapi nei, tēnei wāhanga kōrero nei, mā tātou. I'll hand over to you, Kaumātua, to finish off that.
Kia ora.
Ai, nā reira tēnā tātou. He anau ki te tukumihi kia koutou, o koutou whakāturanga. Nei, i whare ki amu a tātou nei, kia whakaora te wai nei, kia whakaora anō hoki ngā ātua, rā korangi nui e tū o nei, ko papa tūnuku e takotai, me ngā tamariki katoa kei Wanganui. Nā reira, tēnā rawa atu kia koutou mo tēnei kōro miharo rawa atu. Nei rā ngā mihi kia koutou ngā iwi e waru, mo ngā mahi kua mahi e koutou nei i tēnā wā tēnā koutou. Nā reira kia no tātou. Unuhia, ngā tāmitanga o te wā, ngā kaupei tanga o te wā, ngā heringa o te wā. Kia wātea, te tinana kia wātea, te ngākau kia wātea, te wairua, te mukia tāne te waiora, tāne te whakaputa nei ki te whai au, ki te ao mārama. Te utu rāwhiti whakamaua, kia tina haumi e hui e, tai kai.
Kia ora, everyone. I think we're just going to take a 5-minute adjournment now, stretch our legs, get a cup of tea. We'll meet back in, actually, we're going to take 10 minutes. So 10-minute break and we'll meet back. Thank you.
Mute yourself, Kate.
Oh, yeah. Is Claire still on the line?
Sure, you'd have to take that one with Claire.
Excuse
Okay.
me, we are still live streaming at the moment.
Oh, Claire's just bringing me. Okay, thank you. I'm just going to take this one.
And videos off.
Thanks.
Kate, mute yourself.
Am I not muted?
No, down bottom of the screen. Yeah, you are. You are now. Cool. can I ring you, Kate?
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, is everyone back? Robin, I was sort of hanging. I'm not sure, something's trying to load. So I'd rejoin the call, but maybe it was actually I just wasn't perhaps got my screen set up. Robin, are we live streaming again, or are we not live streaming again?
We continue to live stream, Kate. So if we could ask members to turn their videos on and join the meeting again.
Oh, okay. Is everyone back? Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Sonia and Maxine to outline the recommendations in our report. I think that's where we are in our run sheet. Tania, is there anything else which I've missed? No? All good. Okay. Max, I'll hand over to Maxine and Sonia.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and Sonia Lusink-Sladen's Senior Freshwater Policy Advisor is just going to run you through the resolutions that are being recommended to you, and will be available to answer any questions after that.
Thank you, Maxine. We're just using first names today. I know it's a bit of a change, but that's how I'd like my meetings to be. All right. Please call me by my first name.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Sonia Lusink-Sladen, taku ingoa. I'm Sonia Lusink-Sladen, as Maxine mentioned, a Senior Freshwater Planner. I'll take it that the report on the agenda has been read, and I just wanted to quickly lead you through the recommendations. The first being that the report be received, including the attachments, which of course is the Te Mana o Te Wai Stage 1 report, and the 20 recommendations that are summarised there. And secondly, that the Council approve the ongoing collaboration with Te Tau Ihu and the 3 Top of the South councils in progressing this work onto stage 2. If there are any questions of me, happy to take them now.
I'm just looking for any questions. I can't see any. Maxine, maybe if you can flag me. Rachel, we have a question from Rachel Sampson, and then Brian.
Thanks very much, Kate. I'm just signalling that I'd be happy to move this whenever it's appropriate.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. Brian? Brian, you're on mute still.
So, yeah, I was also happy to move, but we'll second it. Just a question. One of the recommendations that comes through the report is the need for resourcing, and I suppose that goes both ways. We got the capacity, within our own organisation and with iwi to deliver the expectations that, and the quite reasonable expectations that are outlined in the stage 1 report to get us through to stage 2 and on to stage 3.
Maxine, I'll let you answer that.
Thank you. It is fair to say that we are pretty stretched as an organisation at the moment, covering multiple work streams in a endlessly changing resource management space at the moment. We do have staff internally who, are very keen to progress this in a collaborative way. I think what we are seeing and have seen across the 3 councils is that this collaborative approach actually gives us an opportunity to keep progressing the project even when any one council might not have capacity at that single time. So what we're seeing at the moment is a sharing of work to progress this project, and that's happening between the 3 councils. Certainly, Marlborough is caught up in the appeals phase where we're sort of doing a lot of the initiation work. Sonia's been working a lot in the previous year to progress this report, getting to the place that it is, and what it means for the councils. And then we are sort of expecting TDC to also pick up some of the work, over the next few months to progress this stage 2 work. So we're trying to make this be efficient for us as well. But it is quite a significant risk to us that key staff, because we are quite thin on the ground, their availability and ability to get involved with projects as needed may affect how this project progresses, but we certainly have a strong commitment to keep it moving.
Right here.
Do you want to offer an iwi perspective in terms of capacity?
In regards to, I mean, that's always been a challenge for us. I guess what we're fortunate in regards to, as Julie had said earlier on in her presentation, we're a collective. We've come together for efficiency. We've had access to funding. We've also got a wide network, and we're not introducing anything new or working on anything new. This conversation has been, this kaupapa has been around for a very, very long time. And so there's certainly plenty of examples and models to help in regards to how whānau and iwi contribute to freshwater management, how iwi sit at the decision-making table. So we've got lots to draw on. So we're not starting from ground zero, and we're fortunate to be working on this as a collective and working with the councils. So we certainly, I feel that from our end, we've got a lot of information and models and frameworks to draw on to bring to the table for consideration. So we may be, because of all the historical work that's been done, we should be more sort of have a better overview of how and where things can be perhaps implemented to assist councils.
Great. Yeah, no, I'm heartened to hear that. So I suppose one of the just a comment really a bit further along with the work that's been done with the Nelson plan. So I suppose we're in that, I use the word sweet spot in terms of that. Can that be shared? Can that work be shared with the other councils and with iwi?
Yes. So we are intending that the discussion at the moment is how we can best use what Nelson has already done and achieved for the advantage of the other councils to bring them further faster by drawing on whatever Nelson's done where it is appropriate to do so. So a lot of the planning concepts and the frameworks are likely to be able to be transferred across to the other councils, but some of the specific catchment level visions, the catchment level priorities, and how allocations or activities are managed by catchment may be different.
Yeah, okay. Just a quick question, just in terms of the hierarchy of priorities, which is in the national policy statement, I think it's outlined in was it page 39 of the report, just the hierarchy of priorities, you know, the health and well-being, the Maori, the health needs of people such as the drinking water and the ability of people to provide for their basically social, economic and cultural. It almost sounds like the four well-beings, or three of the four well-beings in the local government. How's that being incorporated into other parts of our planning, policy and planning work?
Are you referring to other parts of freshwater planning or other parts of our Nelson plan?
The other parts of that, well, in the freshwater work, but also just in other planning work. Just a pretty high level answer. I'm not after a sort of a detailed question, but there's obviously a recognition of that hierarchy.
I feel comfortable talking about, obviously freshwater is our focus at the moment, and we have a short-term focus of implementing the hierarchy through freshwater. But as has been already noted by iwi and others today, there is a holistic approach required to fully implement freshwater. So to that extent, some aspects of that hierarchy will filter through, pardon the pun, filter through into other parts of the Nelson plan. Maxine, do you want to add to that?
Yes, I think there's still some way to go before we can actually really do that. But it does also highlight the advantage of a unitary plan, that we can, do that in a much more integrated way. And the three top of the South councils are in a good position to do that. Unfortunately, we're actually a bit stymied in the way the legislation has been set up, because they force us to create a separate sort of freshwater planning instrument and a separate process that doesn't necessarily well integrate with how you make decisions on the rest of the plan. They require us to go through a freshwater hearing process with separate freshwater commissioners and things. So there is a risk for integration to not occur well because of that legislative sort of construct. But we will be looking to see how we manage land use activities and our other planning requirements to still give effect to Te Mana o Te Wai. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks for that. Appreciate the answer. Thanks, Sonia.
Thanks, Brian, and thanks, Maxine and Sonia. I've got Mel and then Rachel Rees.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I go to Maxine and talk about financial capacity? Should we be revisiting some of the work we've been doing on our annual plan coming into effect 2022, so that we can be quick off the blocks and get some traction on this as far as funding goes?
Thank you, Mel. We already have budgeted in our annual plan for NPS FM implementation, and within that is monies for contributing to the stage 2 work through the capacity and capability building funds that was approved through the Ministry of the Environment grant. So we're contributing to that along with Tasman and Marlborough. We also have funding set aside for staff time and potential project management contribution to that as well. So from my perspective, we have sufficient funds already allocated towards it. What we highlighted in the report, however, was that as we work through the implications from this report and decide on how we implement and give effect to Te Mana o Te Wai and the co-design or the co-governance arrangements, then that will require separate decisions of council and may require separate consideration of funding requirements, and that would come through to you in all likelihood in the next round of annual plan or long-term budgeting. But because we don't yet know what that is or what that's going to cost, then we're unable to provide it at this time. But we are anticipating, and certainly have in the long-term plan, you know, sort of contingency funding around how we implement the NPS.
Thanks, Maxine. Mel, have you got any follow-up questions? No. Okay, Rachel.
Hi, kia ora, Kate. Maxine, look, thank you for the report. I'm actually quite interested just in the recommendations that have come through, and you've summarised those on page 25 of the report. The final one relates to developing and implementing decision-making models, and you've talked a little bit about that now. When I went to the report, I went to page 81 through 82 in particular, and just looking at the recommendations there, which look at the principle that tangata whenua must be given a meaningful place in the decision-making process of council, and that is absolutely important to achieve, necessary to respect rangatiratanga mana kaitiaki responsibilities. So, and to make sure that there's a fulfilment of the treaty partnership. So I read through that section, and I can see that that's work that iwi are going to consider. It needs to be led from the iwi authorities will look at that, and then hopefully some options will come forward. And I do see the commentary in that section around regional governance and the potential for it to be more efficient if there was one council rather than three. Acknowledge that. But in the interim, I'm just interested, and maybe this is a question for iwi, is to some sense of time frame of when, you know, just thinking about that planning. You know, Mel's talking about the planning. I'm thinking about all the legislation processes. So when do you think we'd be ready to start to have that sort of proactive discussion where the options will come back so we can start looking at those? And probably it is a question for iwi.
So, Rachel, your question is when will iwi bring forth some options for consideration for decision-making, for iwi at decision-making tables?
Yes, that's correct. Kura, have you got a sort of sense of timing around that? And I'm coming back to just thinking about that broader alignment that we need to do across a range of processes, and including our thinking around the future for local government. That's, you know, a live discussion for us. So, and that really can't be done separately. It's got to be, you know, when we're engaging the future for local government, we've got to be doing that collaboratively with with iwi. So I can see this is obviously a recommendation, but I just wondered if it had any sense of time frame.
I mean, I think it's always been a sense of urgency for Māori, you know, ia tau. So again, it's I guess the timing of it. I mean, this is just my personal view. I think, you know, where there's a willingness around the table, power table, to implement change, we can certainly bring forth models, because there's already existing models operating around the country. So that's not new. It's more the timing around the table here, and for councils and councillors and local government, I guess, to help support that change. So it's not even subject to anything else that's really going on. It's been sort of an ongoing position. It's always been advocated for by Māori to be at the decision-making table. So, yeah.
Maybe I could support from a executive point of view, from the iwi GMCM point of view. It would be fair to say that we are watching the space pretty closely. We have an every intention to participate at whenever level of interaction it's needed in terms of governance. So we haven't quite got the detail required yet to make final decisions, but we are taking advice from obviously our pōtaiao, who are giving us direct information and intel on timelines and so forth. And we will respond accordingly as requested. So to get a coordinated response may take a little more time, but the clarity around the purpose and what the makeup of the governance, if that's agreed to early, we're very keen on progressing our interests in this area, Rachel. So we look forward to the conversation and being there.
Kia ora, Shane. And I think the message I would give is that we would welcome that opportunity. So we may need to just make sure that we pick up, if we don't get to the complete design, we make sure that we're picking up opportunities as we go through. So
well, my only feedback to them, Rachel, is then there are already in place decision-making forums for iwi in terms of our chairs and other forums. So from that strategic point of view, governance point of view, that is obviously a first port of call. But I think if we're wanting to operationalise things and get things moving, then there are the other management and operational forums available as well. So it can be a combined thing. But my point probably is the devil will be in the detail. Who informs who takes the lead here, and who is going to actually initiate. And that's what I'm talking about. Communication is really important in this, that there's a measured strategic process through all of this, so we're not left waiting for someone to do something. When in fact, actually, there's an opportunity cost if we don't get in there and do it. So happy to do it, but just we need someone to be in the middle conducting the orchestra to allow us to do that. If that's iwi, or let's have a conversation around that, or if that's council, let's make some decisions around, or combination of two. And if we use the RIF form as an example of co-governance, which can occur, which probably hasn't been as effective as it should because it's too big, we can maybe use that model as a potential, as an option going forward.
Kia ora, Shane. So probably just thank you. Just feedback to the officers. I think please, just in your thinking about that project planning, the strategic steps that are there, just if we can focus on making sure that we've got that, really thinking through that governance decision making structure, that an opportunity in the timeline around that. So just leave that with you. I just feel this is fantastic work, and but I would say just quite openly, I feel like the structure we have in place to receive it today doesn't feel quite right. We'll do it, but it feels like there's room for improvement on how we could receive this through the structures that we have. No disrespect to the chair, but just we need to be thinking about how we can respond to the kaupapa. Kia ora.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks for raising that. Julia, you had a comment.
Yes, because I think the question goes a bit bigger than just this kaupapa. So I just wanted to chip in where some of the thinking has been at. And obviously it's more efficient for iwi when there's consistency across the 3 Te Tauihu councils, which currently have quite different structures in place around that iwi decision making. And so there's a desire, I think, to perhaps have a consistent approach where you have consistent iwi representatives. And we've also identified where some of the flaws are in terms of who and how you come about the who is in that decision-making seat. So there's quite a bit of technical detail to work through, and it would require all 3 councils to make some changes so that there's an efficiency there as well, particularly with cross-boundary issues. It's also worth pointing out that the LGA is under review and the NBA is under review, and the NBA, well, not the NBA, the replacement RMA may provide an avenue for that sort of engagement through the planning committees. So it is hard at the moment. We're experiencing the same difficulties when there's so much legislative change coming through, and we're trying to adapt to it just as quickly as you are. But we've only got a few less staff to try and do that with. But it might be more of a watch this space because from where we are, whether it's a seat on the committee, which is what Marlborough has, whether it's through the working group that Nelson instigates regularly between governance levels, and Tasman, what they're starting to have that discussion now again, because we're in 3 different places, it's very difficult to put a timeline on that. But what we can say is, regardless of whether any of us want to, the government has put a timeline of 2024 to achieve Te Mana o Te Wai, So we've got to try and work to that as best we can. And this is what we see as the most efficient and effective way of trying to meet that very tight time frame.
Thanks, Julie. Rachel, Rees, just picking up on your comment in terms of the process, had you had something in mind in terms of how we could have received this report in a different way?
No, Kate, well, I'm just, I think Julia's kind of highlighted it. It would be wonderful to be sitting collectively,
Yes.
Together with receiving this report today. So that's the piece of work that we need to start thinking about, I think, as we go through how we make that work. So, and it's also who is, the collaboration is going so well. I think we should celebrate that. And what I think it is that creates future opportunities that we should all, use our best endeavours to realise.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. I understand now. So yeah, definitely we should be celebrating, and it's a shame we're all on Zoom. It'd be nice to at least be in the same room in terms of Nelson City Council and iwi, but it would be good to have a greater collaboration with all our councils as well. So thanks for that. I think that's all the questions. So, and the recommendation's been moved and seconded by Rachel Sanson and Brian. I think we're good to move into debate now. If anyone wishes to debate the item, there's been quite good conversation. I can see a few hands raised in terms of debating, so I think we'll move into debate now. Can I just check that there's no more questions? If you just start speaking if you have a question of staff or of iwi. No? Okay, so I'm going to hear from Rachel first and then Rohan. Rachel Sampson.
Thanks very much, Kate. Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm speaking in support of receiving this report and adopting the recommendations. I'd like to acknowledge Ngā iwi o Te Tauihu as a collective, but also all of those individuals who've been involved in this critically important work. I feel that one of the things that really struck me when reading this report was how clearly the challenges, particularly from an iwi perspective, have been laid out, and it's really great to hear those and to consider how we can really look at working collaboratively to achieve the outcomes and the vision for Te Mana o Te Wai. I think there's really clear expectations of what a mutually beneficial partnership looks like, and I think also it begins to lay out a vision for what successful co-governance of taonga of our region, why the whenua looks like. And so I just would really like to acknowledge everybody involved in this, and I'm incredibly supportive of this work, and I just hope that we can keep the momentum up, and also the really incredibly I would say successful collaboration that has worked to date on this initiative. So thanks everybody.
Thanks, Rachel. Rohan?
Kia ora, thanks, Kate. I want to start by saying ngā mihi nui ki te ngā iwi o Te Tauihu for your mahi, your perseverance, and indeed lifetimes of kaitiakitanga for Te Wai and Te Taio of this region. Reflecting on some of the things that have been said today, I just want to acknowledge that right now across the world, it's estimated that 80% of our biodiversity exists under the kaitiaki of Indigenous peoples. When I reflect locally on the impact and the degradation of our environment, of our waterways, I think it's really clear but the Crown has a lot to learn, and a lot more to do. And there's this, I think on page 27 of the report, there's this great line: the difference between being consulted and being at the decision-making table is an ongoing erosion of the mana and rangatiratanga of iwi and hapu, and a fundamental betrayal of the treaty partnership. And I think that that's one of the things that stands out for me across this report, is that actually by embodying Te Tiriti, by partnering, and by the Crown and Council at many times actually standing back and listening, we will deliver far better outcomes for our people and our planet. And I think it's also a message we need to take across our council work streams, not just in this environmental space. But I'm more than happy to support this recommendation and remain committed to bringing that partnership to life as what it should be, a living and evolving relationship. Kia ora.
All right. Thanks, Rohan. I can't see anyone else's hands raised, so I'm going to put the recommendation. All those in favour, if you just want to, actually we'll tick our boxes this time, so if you want to tick your boxes, just green tick if you're in favour, and if anyone's against putting across. Thank you. Glenys, have you got your hand up? If you want to speak? No? Okay. Thanks. That's unanimous, I think. Everyone supports the recommendation, and thank you so much to iwi for being here and being in the virtual room with us today to share your vision. And it is a tremendously exciting piece of work and progressing in this direction, thinking about how we collaborate, co-create and work more holistically on kaitiaki and caring for our whenua, our awa and our people holistically, I think is one of the things that I look forward to seeing happening more and more into the future. So I think now we have another briefing. Is that right, Maxine? I'm going to go back over to Maxine. And I've just lost my run sheet, but yeah, we're going to have another brief report, and we're running a little bit behind, but not too far.
Kia ora, thank you. Yes, we have Ngāti Rārua here to present their environmental strategy, Wipoia Te Ao Tūroa, and our run sheet has slightly changed from what we had planned, so I'm just wondering, Kura and Ro, if you're happy to go to your presentation now. This is part of the quarterly report where we provide an update to Council on a number of documents that are coming through and things of importance to Council. So if Kura, you want to go to that.
Right. Well, kia ora tātou. Tēnā anō hoki e te kaurihira nei, me whakarongo ana ki ngā kōrero o te wā, e pāniki tēnei kaupapa nei, Wipoia Te Ao Tūroa tuatahi, e tautoko nā karakia me nā mihi o kaua, e waha nei i te timatanga o tēnei huihuinga, taino ki tēnei wā, tautoko. Nō reira mātou nei nā uri o rārua iho, kua tatu mai nei, ka whakamana whakatangata tia mai nei tēnei kōrero, tēnei purongo, tēnei rautaki, e pāniki tēnei te mea nui o Te Ao Tūroa kia Ngāti Rārua. Ngāti Rārua e heke o mai nei, mā rungo i ngā hekinga mai raro. Mai kāwhia moana tai noa ki te tauiho o te waka a Māui, Tēnei te mihi atu ki ngā kōrero pūrākau I roto. Mai o tātou mātua tipuna, tainoa ki a mātou nā uri whakatupu nei, kei te mihi ki rā ahua tanga katoa. Pirino ki a tātou, e no tahi nei, e ngā mana I ngā reo, a iwi, a hapu, a whānau, pai marere ki o koutou. Thank you, Kate, and thank you once again to you all. This isn't a brief report. This is a significant document of Ngāti Rāua that we're presenting here today in terms of our aspirations that have come down to generations of our tupuna who I acknowledged came down from Kawhi on the Hekinga, but also acknowledging those tupuna that aren't able to be here a tinana, but are here a wairua, to this first stage of our tabling of our mauri of our report, to hopefully we'll present it in a workable format in May at Whakatū Marae, but in the first instance to acknowledge the effort and the work that's gone into this. And I'm cognizant of the fact that Poipoi Te Aotearoa is an environmental document, but it also sits under a bigger strategic document for Ngāti Rāua of Kia Pai Te Noho, which is predicated by the Tongi Kura, or the saying of our eponymous ancestor, one of them, Tanipuki Koatu, which has told us to kia te whai te tangata I muri a hau kia pai te noho, to live well and to be kind to all peoples after I have gone. So that has been a mantra for us as the generations to follow, to give evidence and give effect to that aspiration for the peoples of Ngāti Rāua. So under that strategy and under that has come Poipoi Te Aotearoa, explaining not only the environmental space and contextualising that from a point of view from environment, but also the structures and all that as well, human, that affect and give effect to the current environment. So, poina taku kōrero whakamihi, whakatau pai ai ki a koutou. I'll finish now and hand over to Rowena, who will give you some context and some thinking around our beautiful plan. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, Jane. Kia ora no tātou. So we're just going to give a really brief presentation on Poipoi Te Aotearoa. The intention is to have a wānanga in May where we can present it more fully. Unfortunately, because of the restrictions of COVID, that can't occur today. So just want to acknowledge what Jane said. We intend to invite all interested council staff and elected councillors to that wānanga at Whakatū. Again, I'll be in May if COVID allows, but as soon as we can. So Poipoi Te Aotearoa is an environmental strategy. We've called it that because it is a very high-level document, but in terms of the Resource Management Act, it is an iwi management plan under the RMA. It was prepared by a working group of Ngāti Rāua whānau and Board of Trustees. And I just want to acknowledge the people here today are on that working group. So we have Shane Graham, our CEO, Anaru Luke, who's one of our Board of Trustees members and our Taiao subcommittee chair. And we also have Barney Thomas, was on the working group as well, our cultural manager. And Kura Stafford is joining us as well. Kura is a Board of Trustees member for Te Rūnanga o Ngāti Rāua, and she also provided really valuable support and input into this document, as did a number of other people in Te Tauihu who've been through this process before, wrapped around support for us as we went on this journey. So kia ora. Now, next slide, please. So, as I say, this is a very high-level strategy highlighting Ngāti Rāua values, priorities and aspirations for environmental management. A lot of thought has gone into that and situating this document within the Western framework of environmental management that we have in Aotearoa. So how to really meld those two systems together. A lot of thought went into that through the working party and into this document. But we've been very clear that the document is for Ngāti Rārua to highlight how the Ngāti Rārua values, priorities and aspirations so that others can get to know that iwi better. It guides high-level operational policy for Ngāti Rārua trustees and for our staff to ensure that what we are doing in our mahi is in alignment with what whānau priorities are. The other thing that we're seeking to do in the strategy is to support and build capacity within Ngāti Rārua whānau hapu and marae to empower them as kaitiaki. As we've been discussing earlier in the day with the Manawa Te Wai project, there's a lot coming down the pipeline, and capacity and capability building is really high on the agenda for all iwi and te tauihu. So this document is also intended to really get stuck in there in the environmental space. Next slide, thank you. So, I don't know what happened there. That's not what my slide looks like, but what this slide is strategic guidance on matters of price priority to Ngāti Rārua. So this document isn't intended to cover everything in the RMA. It's not intended to cover everything in environmental management. One of the things it interacts with is the RMA, but also the Conservation Act and the Takutai Moana Act. There's a lot of other environmental legislation, over 30 pieces of legislation that I looked at when I was preparing this. So we can't speak to all of those in one document. It would, I think, lose its way. So the board gave very clear direction to be high level and strategic on the things that matter most. And so to that end, the document has within it these chapters that really give that flavour of what is the highest priority to Ngāti Rārua. So those chapters are leadership and decision making, protection of Māori, wai or the water, mahinga kai, cultural sites and areas of significance, incorporating mātauranga in environmental management, the coastal and marine area, land use. Some land use activities are addressed specifically, the ones that we find impact on Ngāti Rārua to the highest extent, and resourcing. As I say, this is a high-level document. It contains the broad vision and direction for Ngāti Rārua, but a lot of thought has gone into ensuring that while we haven't covered everything that the RMA covers, anybody that is assessing something like a resource consent should be able to find in this document the general view of Ngāti Rārua with regard to Te Aotearoa. Next slide, thank you. So this slide is just really to show you some of the places that the council staff might interact with Te Aotearoa and other iwi management plans in their mahi. So things like resource consents is a big one, and the RMA policies. There are statutory recognition for iwi management plans in those areas in different forms, but also things like the long-term plan, capital projects, so stormwater upgrades, that type of thing. There's a lot in this document that will give you a sense of where Ngāti Rārua's values lie. And then also reserves policy and projects. That's just some of the areas where council staff would provide guidance on what's particularly important to Ngāti Rārua. Next slide, thanks. Again, I don't know what's happened to the heading on that one, but my one says Wānanga May 2022. So as I mentioned and Shane talked about, we will be extending an invitation to the 3 Te Tauihu councils to learn more about Ngāti Rārua iwi and Puikoi Aotearoa, and to answer questions that people might have. And I've already had a lot of interest from council staff at Nelson as well as other councils asking whether we would be able to do something like that, because they want to get to know the document better and ask questions around it. So we're really excited about that. it would have been ideal to have it now. We're fortunate to have this forum with video conferencing, but it's not ideal for a wānanga like that. So we will be waiting until the COVID situation settles down, and then we'll be very welcome. You'd be very welcome to join us at that wānanga. So kia ora, that concludes my presentation. I'll hand back to Shane.
Thank you, Rowena, and we want to keep it relatively brief, but also not underestimate the importance of this journey for Ngāti Raro. We've come a long way. We've managed to deliver a document which does set out in broad terms our position on Te Aotearoa and give guidance to people, which where guidance was also lacking in the past. Just want to offer an opportunity for our Deputy Chair of our Trust Honoru to say closing words and then finish us off with a karakia.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Just to thank you all for the opportunity for Rowena or Ngāti Raro to present this Opoia Te Aotearoa to you, in the fact that sometime later this year, hopefully May, that we'll be able to invite you to a wānanga a bit more personal to understand us as Ngāti Raro, but also to our aspirations within the the environment itself. Rowena was a bit on the nervous side to present this, but I need to let her know it was harder presenting to our iwi last year. 2 years ago, our iwi asked for a document of this type and calibre, and so we haven't had the chance to interact with them face to face in a wānanga style to actually work through their aspirations, what it looks like, what it could look like in the resource management space, interaction with councils. But we didn't just develop it for councils, we actually developed it for ourselves. That was the premise of why we did it. Because of the rohe that we're in, covering 3 councils, but from Paranui-a-Whiti to Kahurangi Point on the west coast, it's quite a large tract of area, which is substantially a fair amount of it is under public conservation land, but also, as you know, as Nelson City councillors, the marine and the land environment of this rohe is at a point where quite a bit needs to be done to it. More love, more operational actions need to be done so we can, hopefully for our children and our children's children, have something to cherish that we have cherished whilst living here. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
We'll just finish off now our kōrero. Thank you. Unihe turi tapa nui a tāne ki o wātia ki māma te nākau te tina nā te wairu e te ara takatā. A koe ara e rongo e whake irihi aki ki runga ki a tīna uie tai ki. Kia ora. Thank you, Kate.
Kia ora. Thank you so much, Shane, Rowena and Anaru. It's an incredible piece of work and an incredible achievement. I know how much time and energy and effort goes into creating these documents. So really applaud you for having done that for yourselves, and that hopefully councils can utilise it and work closely with you in implementing it. I'm sure the Biodiversity Forum would be very interested to have a presentation from you as well, sharing that document. So maybe we can organise to invite you along to the Biodiversity Forum, and I will look forward to seeing how strongly it aligns with our biodiversity strategy as well. So it's an exciting piece of work for you to have completed. Do we have, Maxine, I'm going to go back to you now. So this is within the quarterly report, which is perhaps, and apologies, I did not mean to diminish the significance of this piece of work, and I am not entirely sure how it ended up in a quarterly report rather than in a report in its own right. But Maxine, in terms of the process now that it is in the quarterly report, what do we do? Do we need to receive this separately to the quarterly report, or do we need to wait until we're into that agenda item?
I would suggest that you wait until you're in that agenda item, as it is part of that report.
Okay, Okay, so in that case, Maxine, is that time for me to hand back over to our Kamatua Luke to close this part of the meeting? Or are there any questions? Perhaps I need to see if there's any questions for iwis for Shane, Rowena, or Anaru and Kura in terms of that presentation we've just had and the report which sits in the quarterly report.
We don't have any questions. We're happy to take any if you have any.
Okay, Glenys, you have your hand up.
Yeah, it's tēnā koutou katoa e te whānau, ngā mihi nui. It wasn't a question, it was more an observation. You have in the document a quote from Whaia Molly, and it was about recognising each other's tikanga. And I've been reflecting right since Barney's first kōrero about recognising tikanga, and that's why this document and the previous presentation, I'm really positive, because in the work that I do, I can see, and you all have seen, the Supreme Court in their last decision recognising the iwi tikanga as law in the TTR decision. So I'm really positive about the things that are happening in this space, and the calibre of work that is coming out of the iwi and tito ihu is amazing. So that's just wonderful. That's all I wanted to say, Kate. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Glenys, indeed it is. So yes, if there's any questions or comments, anything that other councillors would like to share, I can't see any hands up. So in that case, I'm going to hand over to our Kamatua Luke to close this part of the meeting. I hope Kamatua Luke's still here.
Roka, kei whea koe Roka.
Kia ora.
Anya, kei whea tō kaumātua.
Kia ora. Unfortunately, he's been booted out.
Oh, he's been booted out.
I'm not sure why.
Ko tērā pēr ka e mua e tōna hokinga mai, ka whakakapi tēnei wahanga kōrero nei. Kia taupai ai te Māori tūkirungi a tātou i whānā mano, kia homai ki rungi a mātou te nākau mahi ki a tātou i whai tika ka whai pono i roti tēnei wā rire haupai mariri. Kia ora tātou.
Te marama I te po ngā whitu I te rangi, oho ake I te ao nei, papaki kawana me pehe ara e mutu ai te aroha, me rukuruku pēia, ngā wai o te tau e hue.
Kia ora Mel, tēnā tātou. Thank you.
Kia ora Mel, thank you so much everyone. I've just got a few messages popping up on my screen. So we're going to, if we want to stay in the call, they're very welcome to in the room. For we're just going to move into the next item on our agenda, which is the quarterly report, page 117. And I think we will receive the Ngāti Rarua Environmental Strategy Papa Te Aotearoa 2021 first. I think we can move those two recommendations separately. So I'll move that recommendation. And do I have a seconder?
I'll second that, Madam Chair, Mel Courtney.
Thanks, Mel. So I just think it's important that we do this item within the quarterly report first. Does anyone wish to debate that item? Rachel Rees.
Just speaking in support, I absolutely endorse Glenys's comments about the quality of the mahi, the analysis that we're seeing and setting, setting things up so well. Just in terms of the acknowledgement of tikanga as well, it's really good to see that. So, looking forward to the wānanga when we can all gather together at Whakatū Marae.
Yes, indeed. It will be good when we get back to that version of normal. And but I just think that this strategy is so exciting in terms of moving into the future and how we continue to create that paradigm shift and align our ways of thinking and work together collaboratively to create a better future for us all. So I'm going to put the recommendation now. All those in favour will use the green ticks and the red crosses. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to take another 5-minute break because people have been sitting or standing for a long period of time, and then we will come back and staff are going to speak briefly to the quarterly report. So just take we'll take another 10-minute break because we haven't had a proper morning tea break. So 10 minutes, so we'll meet back at 11:45. Thank you.
Kia ora, Kate, are you ready to resume the meeting?
Yes, I am. Kia ora, Robin. Just welcoming everyone back.
Hey, just before we start and go back online, you know, this afternoon we've got a joint shareholders meeting, so it's going to be about 6 of us out this afternoon.
At 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I
It's a
think
fairly-
the briefing should be just half. So I think what we'll do is we'll finish off the quarterly report, and then we'll hopefully be finished by 12:15, 20 past 12, and then there'll be a 40-minute break, and we'll have a brief.
Yeah.
How long is this briefing going to take, Claire or Maxine? Is it half an hour?
Excuse me, through the chair, you are currently live streaming. You haven't stopped live streaming.
Oh,
Can we adjourn, please, briefly?
Yeah.